This is
Make It Plain.
Make It Plain.
MIP
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson.
Make It Plain.
Get woke.
For every worker I met who's gained a little bit of breathing room to seek out a better paying job, for every entrepreneur who's gained the confidence to pursue their small business dreams, I know the families all across America are hurting because of inflation. I understand what it feels like. I come from a family where when the price of gas or food went up, we felt it. It was a discussion at the kitchen table. I want every American to know that I'm taking inflation very seriously, and it's my top domestic priority.
Good morning. Joe Biden's remarks yesterday regarding inflation and what his White House is going to do about it. And just this morning, news breaks that inflation is slowing down somewhat. It's still very high. It's still really at a 40-year high. But there was 1.2% growth in inflation in March, and it is only 0.3% for April. So it is slowing down. In the meantime, President Biden had a lot to share yesterday about what he would do about it. But also, most importantly, he talked about the causes. Now, we've talked about those causes here on Make It Plain. One of the main ones being the issue of supply and demand. As we recover from the pandemic, demand is outpacing supply.
There are two leading causes of inflation we're seeing today. The first cause of inflation is a once-in-a-century pandemic. Not only did it shut down our global economy, it threw the supply chains and demand completely out of whack, especially in countries where more effective recovery responses weren't available, especially in those sectors that rely on semiconductors. These supply challenges have been further hampered by the onset of Delta and Omicron viruses. And you've all seen it, you've all felt it.
So there you have the main reason for inflation, demand versus supply. But then we also, as we know, we're all dealing with this at the pump, gas prices.
A second cause, Mr. Putin's war in Ukraine. We saw in March that 60% of inflation that month was due to price increases at the pump for gasoline. Putin's war has raised food prices as well, because Ukraine and Russia, two of the world's major bread baskets for wheat and corn, are essentially completely stalled. Ukraine has 20 million tons of grain in storage in silos right now. They're trying to figure out how to get out of the country into market, which would reduce prices around the world. Normally we'd have already begun to export them into the market, but it hasn't because of Putin's invasion. So we're working with our European partners to get this food out into the world so they could help bring down prices. But it's difficult because, again, of Putin and the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Gas prices, food prices, we all are suffering. But the interesting thing that I found Biden said yesterday, he talked about the strategic oil reserves. And his policy has been to release 1 million barrels of oil per day from the strategic petroleum oil reserves for the next 6 months to encourage other countries to do the same. But I don't know how many of us know this. It's not just Putin. It's the Republicans who are sheltering companies who own oil wells on federal lands. And those oil wells, they're not doing anything with them. Nothing's happening with that oil. And it comes at a cost to the rest of us.
Well, right now, oil companies are sitting on 9,000 unused leases, oil leases, which are the property of the federal government, on the property of the federal government. Under my plan, they would have to pay taxes, and if they don't use those leases to produce more oil, they just can't sit on it. Unlike under the Republican plan, they'd be allowed to continue to sit on this land without producing while shipping record profits back to their investors.
That's the profit from unused oil fields, coupled with the profit that is made for what extra we pay at the pump. And that's not the only profit. One of the greatest tragedies we have, and this was going on before the pandemic, is the cost of insulin.
I also call for a cap on the price of insulin, which 200,000 American children rely on because they have type 2 diabetes at $35 a month. It costs $10 to make the insulin. They make a significant profit instead of the average price of about $640 a month. Think of the difference it will make in millions of American families, like the family I met with in Virginia about 3 weeks ago, struggling every day, every single month to afford their son's insulin.
And just how else is the cost of food impacted?
Another problem we face is in some industries, there isn't enough competition. And I've often said that capitalism without competition isn't capitalism, it's exploitation. So we're promoting competition for everything from internet services to meat processing. We basically have 4 meat processors in the whole country. They process the meat that goes into the hamburgers you buy. So they set the price. When there's no competition, they can set the price higher and higher. So we're helping smaller companies get into the game to compete and help bring down the overall prices.
Ladies and gentlemen, joining us once again here on Make It Plain from the President's Council on Economic Advisors, Jared Bernstein. Mr. Bernstein, welcome back. How are you?
I am well, and it's a pleasure to talk to you again.
Likewise, pleasure to talk to you as well.
If I can't be in New York City, I just want to talk to somebody in New York City. So
well, wonderful.
That's second best.
That's great. And glad you're able to join us virtually here in New York City. So what is the president's plan for inflation right now?
Well, the president outlined that plan today in a speech where he focused on this as his top priority, easing inflationary pressures on middle-class families, on household budgets. It's something that we've actually been working on for a while now, and he just wanted to make sure people understand how preeminent that priority is for us, because he knows what a challenge it is for families. He grew up in a family where when gas prices went up, they talked about it at the dinner table. The plan has essentially 5 buckets: reducing energy costs, reducing transportation and logistics costs to help get goods from ship to shelf more quickly, reducing kitchen table costs like prescription drugs and healthcare premiums, bringing down the deficit, and increasing people's access to what is a very strong labor market. So he kind of outlined those plans today.
Are these all things the White House can do without Congress?
Importantly, many of them are, but not all of them are. So, for example, I just talked about how important it is to create an accessible, affordable entry into the labor force. That means access to childcare and to elder care that doesn't break your budget. Well, that's legislation. You need the power of the purse for Congress there. And the president has really forward-looking proposals in child and elder care areas, but we have to work with Congress to pass those. But when it comes to, I mentioned transportation, unsnarling supply chains, we could do a bunch ourselves, and we have. The amount of time that goods are sitting in ports has actually come down by half. Shelves are about as well stocked as they were before the pandemic. So we can do a lot of this ourselves, but we need Congress for parts of it as well.
Lowering prescription drug and healthcare costs is another category. How does that happen?
That happens through legislation for the most part. The president has a plan to allow Medicare, for example, which is the large government healthcare program, mostly for retirees. When you have a large program like that with the kind of bargaining clout that Medicare has, they can get lower prices if you let them bargain for it. But weirdly, that's not allowed. So that seems like a common sense change. The president is pushing for more affordable housing costs, lower healthcare premiums, and all of that involves congressional legislation. And by the way, let me just say that that's a really important distinction that he made today in his speech. There are a lot of people out there who are criticizing us on this inflationary point. And if you turn around and ask them, what's your plan? In many cases, they just got nothing. And, let me just say, and I'm quoting the president today, banning books doesn't stock shelves. Beating up on Mickey Mouse doesn't lower prices at the pump. So we think those are powerful points as well in this space.
And to be clear, is it not true that the reason there is a level of inflation, it's kind of a mixed bag. It has to do, the inflation is bad, but the reason for it is good, is it not? The swiftness of the recovery from COVID. That's what kind of caused. Yeah,
that's a really great, and that you're making it plain, which I understand the name of the show here. Yeah, that's a really clear way to say it. I agree with you. I think what I would add to that is two things. One, just to be a little more specific about the part of this that's good, because you're right, fast growth sometimes creates more price heat. We have one of the most welcoming, strongest, tightest labor markets in American history. 8.3 million jobs since this president got here, an unemployment rate that's fallen faster over the past year than any year on record, over 11 million job vacancies, which means workers have lots of choices. A lot of workers bargaining up to get better jobs. My second point is that this is not just an American issue. So sometimes you look at inflation in America, you think, what did we do wrong? It's happening in Europe, it's happening in Germany, it's happening in Canada, it's happening in Mexico. So these are global pressures.
Yeah, and we also know this is especially difficult for families without a lot of median income or with lower median income, including black families, right?
Absolutely. In many cases, things like housing costs, right. Food, childcare. They capture a larger share of the income of lower income families. And that's exactly why we're targeting, for example, more affordable housing on that agenda, why we're trying to set up a childcare system where nobody pays more than 7% of their income for childcare. So those problems are historical and well known to us.
And so obviously you and I can get wonky about it, but the fact of the matter is most people want to know, when will and one of the key things, one of the most important things, when will my gas prices go down? Are we able to timetable that at all? I know the president.
No, look, just to get right down into it. I mean, nobody has a perfect crystal ball, and I can give you all kinds of forecasts, economic forecasts, but we're dealing with, and the president has been straight about this. We're dealing with an aggressor invading a sovereign country in an area that supplies part of that global oil that we've been talking about. And oil is a global commodity, so is food. So given the behavior of Vladimir Putin and this unprovoked and unjust and murderous invasion he's engaged in, we can't accurately predict. I tell you next month, this is what's going to happen. What I can tell you and our listeners is that every forecast I've seen, and I think that's the way to do it. Don't just choose one. Don't just cherry pick. Look at all of them. Shows inflation growing considerably more slowly by the end of this year. Not as slowly as it was before the pandemic, but more slowly. And that kind of turning the corner, I think would help a lot of people feel better, even if it's not all the way to our destination.
Enjoy all your favorite sports like never before at BetMGM. Sign up using code Hawkeye and receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if you don't win your first bet. When you register with BetMGM, you'll get instant access to a variety of parlay selection features, live betting options, player props, and the best daily promotions in the business. And with BetMGM at your fingertips, every play and every game matters more than ever. Place your money line, prop, and parlay bets with the king of sportsbooks today. BetMGM and GameSense remind you to play responsibly and offer resources to help you make appropriate choices. BetMGM.com for T's and C's. 21 plus to wager. Iowa only. New customer offer. All promotions are subject to qualification and eligibility requirements. Rewards issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets. Bonus bets expire 7 days from issuance. Please gamble responsibly. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-BETS-OFF.
The Federal Reserve, did their announcement on interest rates, does that help?
Yeah, I think the Federal Reserve is helping in the sense that they are the first and foremost institution when it comes to fighting back against inflationary pressures. And the president has endorsed this pivot of theirs where they've gone from keeping interest rates very low to gradually raising them in order to have that effect. So that should help dampen some of this heat that we're talking about when we're talking about inflation.
Ms. Bernstein, thank you for joining us as always, okay?
It's been great to talk to you, and I hope to see you again soon.
Thanks for getting woke and listening to Make It Plain. As always, perform an act of kindness on behalf of an elder or young person. Write a letter to a sister or brother who just so happens to find her or himself incarcerated. Offer libations to the ancestors upon whose sturdy shoulders we all now stand. And above all, give thanks to the God of your understanding by whatever name you call her and him. All God asks of us is that we give each other love. Thanks for giving MIP love. And please remember to subscribe and give us a 5-star rating. If all hearts and minds are clear, it has been made plain.